and he will be speaking. He was recently in the West Bank, so he will be speaking and just going through a few slides that he has. And Councillor Hughie Lewis for People Before Profit Alliance and long-term SNDP activist. He was on the Gaza flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla there recently, and he's going to just explain some of the wider political points and as well as the ship itself. So I'm just going to ask Jim to get started.
Hello, just a bit of background on myself. I had an interest in Palestine for a long time. My father was a Palestine policeman from 46 to 48 with the British over there. And growing up here in the 60s, I had an impression about Israel and Palestine that, I suppose I believed the locals or the media that was out there telling us that Israel was a David against the Arab Goliath at the time of formation of the State of Israel. And I think a lot of people that grew up in the 60s would have believed that. And that was about as much as I knew about it, and I got more and more interested over the years. And in recent years, I obviously discovered that the stories that I'd grown up with, and I have to say here that they were influenced by my father to a certain degree, but not hugely. I mean, I believe it was same story that everybody had. But in recent years, I found out that the situation over there was quite different to what I'd realised. So I'd never been to Palestine, and I got an opportunity to go there lately with a group of people. One of them was sitting back there, John, and a whole group of us went. Now, the people who organised the trip would be members of the IPSC, but it wasn't done off their bat, and people came from all different backgrounds. And people like myself just wanted to see what it was all about. So we spent a week there, and it was pretty intense. We got to see quite a lot, met a lot of activists there. We spent the whole week in the West Bank. I travelled separately and met people out there in Tel Aviv airport. We went from Tel Aviv into Bethlehem. We were based in Bethlehem, and from there we went, through the week we went to Nablus, we went to Ramallah, we went to Hebron. We went, as I said, we met a lot of different people in different organisations, and I came back through Tel Aviv then again myself, and saw the contrast in Tel Aviv and what it's like in the West Bank on the way back after spending the week basically in the West Bank. I just, I have a selection of photographs here, just not very professional or anything, but taken by myself and some of the other people that were on it, and I'd just like to run through them. And now, as I say, I know a lot of people here are quite familiar with the situation over there, but these are just what I wanted to demonstrate was the impressions that I myself got on the trip and the people that were with me. So I'm just going to run through a few here. Like one of the first things that when I arrived, what I noticed was, in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, welcome to Israel. And you're sitting down there and you hear these security announcements, the usual ones, don't leave your bags unattended and that. But I've heard something that I've never heard in any other airport, is carrying of weapons in the terminal building is not allowed. So straight away, you're in a completely different situation. Even though the airport in Tel Aviv itself looks, I was expecting to have some sort of an armed camp there, but there was no evidence of heavy security or anything there, except for the guys going around shaking the bins every so often, who I thought were cleaners, who turned out to be security men checking for bombs in the airport. And I had one of them had come. I was waiting for the rest of the group, and one of them came over to speak to me, and was very interested in what I was doing over there, but he wasn't told exactly what I was doing over there. But as I say, we travelled into Bethlehem, and this is one of the first things you notice when you're going into the West Bank, which I hadn't realised. And there's a lot of things I saw there that I hadn't realised from far. The West Bank is basically off limits to Israeli citizens. So like looking at that, you'd say there's a definite separation. And when you travel through it, you realise that the whole lot is under complete Israeli control. That there's and one of the places that struck me most, and most of the people with me, I'm sure, would say the same, was Hebron. We walked down this particular street in Hebron. You can see the barrier going across there. When we walked down it, we didn't realise what the barrier was for. And we were told when we got to the other end, Palestinians can walk up this side, and Jewish people and internationals can walk up the other side, which I thought was extremely strange, obviously. But this place, is right in the West Bank, and supposedly in an area that Israel has said is not part of their state, even if you go along with their belief that they own the rest of the area. So we saw this the way things were there in Hebron, and we met these people who are belong to a group called the Economical Accompaniment Program, and they're people from different countries who go out there and just basically witness the way the Palestinians are treated in their own area, especially in Hebron, and they go with them as they go about their daily lives. I think this particular lady is from Norway and this man was from Canada, and they'd be pretty typical of the people that would be there. One of the first things we noticed was the street. These are Palestinian houses facing onto the street. On this particular street, no Palestinians are allowed to walk. These buildings are occupied by Palestinians, as I say. They can't open the window, they can't open the door. It's illegal for them to open the window or open the door. They have to stay on that side. If they do, they're contravening the law. The law obviously is enforced mostly by Israeli police, by Israeli military, the IDF. But you have people walking around like this guy. You see this guy here? Walking up the street, there's a rifle hanging off his back. Now he may be an off-duty military person, he may be a civilian. They're allowed to carry guns. He may be one of these so-called settlers. And this is what people are facing daily. So you can imagine if somebody's going to break the law and open the window, this is what they would be facing. This is one of the streets that we had to detour around because we wanted to walk around the areas that only the Palestinians can walk on. So this is an area where supposedly only Palestinians can walk. So just some graffiti there. It says "Gas the Arabs, JDL, the Jewish Defence League." Pretty nice people, as you can imagine. This is just, again, an area that had to be detoured around. The street that you're looking at first runs for about a couple of 100 metres in front of this area. And this is a detour that they have to come around, go across a hill, back down the other side to get this couple of 100 yards, or a couple of 100 metres, because they're not allowed to walk there. Same with this, we walked up this hill here, and it's open to both Palestinians and the Jewish settlers to walk up that street. But then you get to the top, at this point here, and you can see the soldiers are on the street, soldiers are everywhere. And when you go to the left, only Jewish people can walk up that section. There's nothing to say that it's forbidden to Palestinians, they're just supposed to know. And in fairness, they do know most of the time. These are Israeli houses, or Jewish houses. As I say, no, this is in Hebron, this is in the middle of the West Bank. At the end of the street there's a checkpoint that people have to go through to go about their daily business. They have to walk through this cabin area, there's a series of turnstiles, and there's barbed wire. While we were there, Palestinians going about their daily business, were getting their items checked and maybe have to go back through a couple of times or whatever, and we pretty much faced the same thing. I've been told, and I would believe that they get a lot worse treatment when there aren't international people around. We saw people being hassled ourselves at these checkpoints. As I said, these people might be going to market on one side of this checkpoint and might be living on the other side, and might be have to work somewhere across the other end of the street. So they have to go through this maybe a few times a day. If the soldier decides to close the door and not let them through, there's nothing they can do about it or delay them or whatever. And again, you look, this is another side of one of these checkpoints, and just to stress again that it's not just Palestinians that their movements are controlled, it's Jewish people as well. I mean, it's Jewish access forbidden now into that area. Having said that, you're in the middle of the West Bank, and a lot of these areas are open to Jews only. This is in Bethlehem, this is the wall. This is the other checkpoint that you would go through to go into Jerusalem. People pass through this, go to work. Sometimes they close it, sometimes they decide to open it. This particular, where this graffiti is there is a gate. It hasn't been open for a very long time. It's supposed to let traffic through it. Traffic has to go through another checkpoint. When people go through there, again, it might be subject to delays. Sometimes people might spend 5 or 6 hours in total in a day to get to a job that might be a mile or two away from where they're living. Just flick through some of these here. This is the wall area around Bethlehem, and you can see it's quite in your face. And now talking about the wall run is supposedly to guarantee Israeli security, and was built on the pretext of stopping suicide bombers, and there is indeed evidence that it has stopped a lot of suicide bombers, attacks, etc. If it was placed on the separation boundary between the West Bank and Israel, we've spoken to some Palestinian people who told us they wouldn't have any problem with it. Actually, one guy said he'd help them to build it. The problem is it doesn't go along the border. Most of the time it's on Palestinian land and stretches deep into the Palestinian areas. And again, these are areas that are supposedly recognised by Israel as being part of Palestine. And they say that's not a wall at all, it's a fence. And this is the kind of fence that they're talking about. You have a fence down the middle, you have a patrol road on each side, you have 2 sand tracks on the side of the roads where people walk to see the footprints. You have an observation system on this side, and you have a ditch on the Palestinian side. And you'll notice it says, on one side it says the West Bank, and on the other side it says Israel. For a lot of the wall, that's not the case. It's the West Bank on one side, and it's the West Bank on the other side. And that's the big thing about the wall. Most of it is on Palestinian land, and is separating people from their between their homes and their jobs, between their homes and their schools, etc. And you can see that this is the Aida refugee camp on the edge of Bethlehem. It's one of many refugee camps that were established in 1948. People know the history of it. As I say, we went in to see it for the first time, and it's quite stark to think that these people went there in 1948, and it's been their home ever since. There's no room for expansion. There's no room for people to go about their daily lives in any decent sort of a way. They're just basically confined to these camps. And even the people who go about their daily lives outside of there are under constant military monitoring while within the territory of the West Bank. This is just typical of pretty much any intersection. You have the IDF keeping an eye on what's going on. You have some military vehicles on the road. You have flying checkpoints, as well as all these other checkpoints that they have to go through, walls and areas like that. Israeli settlements on the West Bank are usually on hilltops. They basically command the whole area because of where they're established. And as I said earlier, the wall is supposedly a fence for most of it. It's only supposed to be a wall in built-up areas. You can see that this picture here belies a lot of that. I mean, this wall that's going across here, and again, walls around all these settlements. We went into one of the settlements just to see how the other half lives. This is the entrance to the settlement. There's an armed security on it, probably private security, but it's Israeli state money that's paying for it one way or the other. You could be forgiven for thinking that this particular area is some sort of a housing tract from Southern California, but it's actually a Jewish settlement on the West Bank, in the middle of the West Bank. And this is the sort of infrastructure, etc., that's around it. Again, here's just a more picture of the settlements, and you can see the wall down to the front of it as well. You can see an olive tree here. Olive trees are kind of synonymous with Palestinian culture, and some of these trees are hundreds, even thousands of years old. This particular one, and many like them, were uprooted from Palestinian land and planted on the entrance to these settlements where Jews only live, and in the settlements themselves. Then you have a water park on this particular settlement. This is out in the desert where water is very scarce, and they're building a water park where their kids can go play, boating, etc. Within the water park. Most of the water that comes from, a large part of the water that's supplied to Israel comes from on the Palestinian land. They take it out, they extract it from the ground, they pump it out, and they sell it back to the Palestinians after the Israelis have got their cut of it. You have people like the Bedouin who live in the desert who have no access to water, and sometimes they like to tap into the lines, so they have these barriers around them, and you can imagine what would happen if they went to take some water from it. There's the wall again, right out in the middle of the desert. You can see it's a little bit more than a fence. This is Al-Walid, which is a village on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Up on the high ground in front of you is the area of Jerusalem, the suburbs of Jerusalem expanding out, and there's settlements off to the right. The hinterland of that village is being taken over by the wall. There's constant protest there, and there's demolition orders on houses there. This is one of the activists people who mount protests there, usually on a weekly basis, and there's a lot of areas like that. Yeah, I just want to run through a few more of these just to give you an idea of what it's like. The police presence on the West Bank are Palestinian Authority police and Palestinian Authority military. The story we got from the locals is that when the Israeli Defence Force decides to come in at night time and snatch some kids, etc., to take off for questioning, these guys disappear, and if they don't, they could be shot, and it has happened. This is just a permaculture project that's run by some British people in order to try to get people to make better use of the water resources available, because water is a big thing there, and as you can imagine, the more that's been, it's got to the stage where the Dead Sea is shrinking, the Jordan River is shrinking, and they're going to run out of water there relatively soon. But it's still the fact that most of the water comes from Palestinian areas. This is the entrance to a Bedouin camp. I'll just try and get through this pretty quickly. These are where the Bedouin live, and again you see Bedouin kids here. One night, one of the Bedouin came out of the camp, and this is a stock picture of an Israeli tank. One of those was parked right next to his tent, and within a few minutes they started firing shells out into the desert. His kids went crazy, and he went out and asked the guy, why are you doing this? There was no trouble around the camp at the time, and he was told, I'm under orders to come out here and do some target practice. And apparently this is a regular occurrence in this Bedouin camp. There's the Bedouin camp again. I'm just going to shoot through this because I'm running low on time. This school was built by the Bedouin in this particular camp. I think they built it for about €5,000. They built it from tyres, and they plastered over the tyres, and they did a really good job in it. They were visited by some of the local Israeli settlers. They came down and they remarked at how they'd done such a great job, and they thought they were on good terms with their neighbours being the Israeli settlers on Palestinian land. 2 days later they got a demolition order from the military telling them they're going to have to knock it. They're still under orders to knock this school down, and that's the only school that they have in the camp, or indeed in the area. I'll just flick through these. I'm conscious of time now, so I'm just going to flick through a few more of these. They want to move these Bedouin people, and they want to build houses for them. Nice little apartments. This is the area where they want to build a house. This is the municipal dump. They're going to build, as I say, apartments for them. on this municipal dump. They're going to take them away from a culture, from a way of life that they've lived with for thousands of years, take away their animals and get them to live right here. So that's the sort of thing that they're facing. There's a lot more that I wanted to go through with this, but I'm running pretty low on time. One particular thing that I wanted to talk about, and I won't get time to talk about it now, is that there's regular protests there where the wall and fence, etc., are encroaching on Palestinian villages and Palestinian areas in general. And one of the things that we did when we were there was attend one of the demonstrations, and there was we were told that because there was an international presence, that the locals were treated a lot less harshly than they would be under normal circumstances. And that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in getting the awareness up with people here. I think it's important that as many people as possible visit these areas and see what the conditions that these people are living under, and maybe go along to some of these demonstrations and get the international awareness up, because the more awareness that there is out there, the better chance these people have of making their case. Now, I'm just nearly at the end of it now. Just give me a minute. This is one particular village that where those demonstrations were happening, and this was the one that we went up to. As you can see, it was being led by a few locals. You can see one of them was the wheelchair, serious threat to Israeli security, as you can imagine, And we had intended just to go up to witness the demonstration, and ended up getting pretty much stuck into the thick. Now this only takes a couple of minutes, so if you don't mind to just let it go through. This is the reaction to the normal demonstrations there every Friday after prayers. This is tear gas, and apparently this is pretty mild in comparison to what happens there regularly. One of the pictures you saw earlier there is where a monument to a guy that was hit there by a rubber bullet 2 years ago, and he died in that area. I said there's only a minute or so left of this, but this is the reaction that we got to the demonstration there. I just leave that one on, and I'll finish up with that. That's one of our group with the tricolour there, Tomas, from Clare. As you can see, the rings of barbed wire and a track between it and the wall, and the Israeli soldiers well protected behind it. As you can imagine, a serious threat. That's me walking here, keeping me back to it. And that's the response. That's about it. And I just, as I say, I'm just interested in getting the awareness level with people up, and I'd like people to consider, maybe one of these days taking a trip over there to see exactly what it's like on the ground there. Thank you.
As far as I'm aware, the IPSC, or as far as I know, that organisation are planning another trip over to the West Bank in the new year, well, probably autumn next year. So I would encourage anyone that is interested in going to get in contact with them. I'm just going to ask Huey Lewis to come in.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. So usually when I do this talk, I do it on my own, and it takes a bit of time. Go through the history of Palestine a little bit to give you some context. The flotilla itself, perhaps I leave the bulk of the history thing until the discussion maybe, because that's usually it does come up anyway. On November 4th, the Israeli Navy boarded our ships in international waters. In June of this year, we attempted to go on the Freedom Flotilla 2, I think it was the 7th or 8th attempt, to reach Gaza by sea. We left from Turkey, we were planning to leave from Turkey in June until the Israelis, we believe, most likely went underneath our ship and removed the piece of the propeller hull, either by plastic explosive or by a cutting device. about this size, only the size of your thumb, removing the propeller shaft. But it was designed so that when we went out to sea, there's 2 propeller shafts, we put the propeller up full, it caused a kink and sink the ship very fast. But luckily, one of our engineers, Pat Fitzgerald, is a Sinn Féin councillor in Waterford. He actually could hear the small vibration. Just by chance, they took it out 3 miles and back, and we were able to then pull it out of the sea. And luckily, we found it before we got to go. But we got the propeller shaft fixed, and we set November as a date to possibly go for the next time. We set out from Turkey. 15 crew, 15 passengers and crew, 1 Greek captain. The rest of us are Irish. Broad range. Myself representing P4 Profit. Paul Murphy, MEP, representing the United Left Alliance. We Sinn Féin councillors on board. We Labour Party member, trade union reference. We even had Chris Andrews, former Fianna Fáil TD, on board as well. So the journey to get to Gaza takes approximately 560 miles, and we had to go 10 miles an hour. So, the thoughts of a Mediterranean cruise from Turkey to Gaza may seem quite pleasant, but believe me, it's not when you're going 10 miles an hour. And obviously the purpose, obviously the reason we went to Gaza in the first place, because the horrific treatment people in Gaza are suffering under the hands of the Israelis. Gaza voted in their wisdom, or not in their wisdom, democratically in 2006 to elect Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement. And after this, Israel annexed Gaza and has under complete military blockade and siege, not allowing basic goods get in out of Gaza, denying medical aid. The port is completely blocked off. So any resemblance of kind of normal civil life in Gaza is completely shut off, and the whole place is completely alienated. In fact, to have any semblance of a civil society, one needs to operate a port. 80% of trade comes in out of a port, so it's highly important and vital. Half its population are under 16, 80% of its population rely on aid from the Israelis because they can't get it from anywhere else, basically. So it's quite a horrific situation in Gaza, and there's an international civil call from the people of Gaza for politicians, from civil representatives from across the world to attempt to go there. Originally we had 11 ships. That was struck down to 2 after the Greeks, and we believe under the influence of the IMF, and the Israelis refused to let the ships go from Greece. There's only 2 of our ships left from Turkey, the MV Saoirse, the Irish ship, and the Canadian ship, the Tahrir, named after Tahrir Square, obviously the birthplace of the recent Egyptian revolution. It took us, I'd say 52 miles, 48 hours before the Israelis actually came into sight. We were surrounded by 15 Israeli ships and also 5 Israeli warships. An incredible, colossal, use the expression David and Goliath. You couldn't have any more of a David than Goliath situation than that. We explained to the Israelis numerous times under no condition were we going to stop for them. That they weren't allowed on our ship, they weren't welcome on our ship, but under no condition, if they were to board our ship, would we be violent as a response. When we said this, they surrounded our ship with 3 water cannons, hit us with high pressure water cannons, the same water cannons used to sink Palestinian fishermen if they go 4 miles off the coast of Gaza. They hit us with these high pressure water cannons. 2 were aimed from both sides, the starboard and the port side of the ship, and 1 was coming into the bridge, actually set the bridge on fire. The electric shut the generator down. They also pushed our 2 ships, the Tahrir and the Saoirse, together, causing us to cut the gangplank away on the Saoirse, and also create a hole. There was actually 2 foot of water coming in. The ship was actually sinking when we left it. Jim the Great idea to do a PowerPoint presentation. Unfortunately, despite a degree of photography, but the Israelis took every piece of equipment we had off us, even took MP3 players and everything. So we know documentary evidence of what happened at sea, apart from footage that was actually released by the Israelis themselves. So the Israelis got on board our ship, approximately 20 commandos. One of them actually had an Irish accent, which isn't uncommon in these situations, to match up people from international backgrounds with their same nationality. They point us, automatic rifles in our faces. It took 3 hours for them to bring us to Ashdod in Israel. They wanted us to get off the ship. We said, under no condition we get off the ship. You're kidnapping us, so we're not complying. which basically, when we got to Ashdod, we requested that the Irish consulate come, and we walked off the ship with the presence of the Irish consulate. We were then taken, it took us about 4 hours, we were taken to an immigration centre. In the immigration centre we were questioned by Mossad and by the Israeli Defence Forces. We were interrogated for about half an hour each only. There was about four of them. It was incredibly bad interrogation, I have to say. They'd ask you like, oh, tell me your email, I won't tell anyone else, things like that, really poor, and to be honest with you, the incompetence of the Israeli security actually astounded me. Although they're one of the most resourced in the world, they certainly weren't used to dealing with these types of situations. I should say that the way they dealt with us is only a microcosm of the way Palestinians are treated in Palestine, and we knew this all the way through. We were able to. This what helped us to kind of, I hate the expression, but push the envelope with the Israelis as much as we could. After our immigration, we were taken to prison in Ramla, now in Israel, but it's part of Palestine in 1948, where Yitzhak Rabin had actually forced 50,000 Palestinians and ethnically cleansed Palestinians from the area. We were taken to a prison called Givon. Numerous times Israelis wanted us to sign documents to say that we'd entered Israel legally. No, we haven't entered Israel legally. We're in our international waters. We're going to Gaza, so under no condition were we going to sign any documents. But the perception was put out at home that if you sign these documents, then you will be released. In other words, by us not signing them, we're responsible for our own incarceration. I should say this is completely false. The only people that were released after we were brought to the immigration centre were actually journalists on the Canadian ship. In fact, some of the activists on the Canadian ship signed the papers, and they were still left in prison with us for approximately a week before they were released. We were told we could read under the Israelis' own literature that they had to release us within 72 hours. They were obliged to deport us, so we knew that if we hadn't signed this would be our security. So we got to prison, they took off our watches, they took writing materials away, read materials. There was televisions in the room that they had taken out, not we were bothered about that, but the clocks were changed, so they were very, very much trying to disorientate you. They come in during the night in our cell. They couldn't pronounce my name properly. They called me Huggy, so it was Huggy, stand up, and they want you to stand up during the night so they could count you. We were exhausted the first night. I'd actually food poison on the ship, so it was good conditioning for prison. I was delighted the first day to be in prison, to be honest with you, just to get a bit of rest. But the second day we said, we're not going to take these conditions, because it was obvious they were trying to be as difficult as they could with us. Without beating us, obviously, but to try to stop us from ever coming back again. So we had a number of protests in the prison. We refused to go back to our cells. We had a list drawn up. We demanded to see the warden. And it was very obvious that they weren't used to being treated like this. The Israelis in their own head couldn't actually understand that white Westerners were going to attempt to go to Gaza in the first place. So it did confuse them, and we were able to get some concessions from them. We had free association after the first day. Which is essential. We were able to get read materials, but they didn't allow us a phone call, for example, for 3 days. When we did have a phone call, we had 3 Israelis around us, prison officers, waiting to put the phone if we said anything political. So we were just about to say the weather was great, basically. So the prison experience, it wasn't very pleasant, but it was far worse for the women that were on the ship than it was for the men, because the women were treated much more harshly. Despite us winning some concessions, we were told that these concessions would apply to the women as well. They didn't. In fact, to be honest with you, we probably could have still been in prison and wouldn't be in as hard a time as the women had, And there's an old expression that says, shoot the women first. I think the Israelis are well aware of that. We had very strong women with us. It's just a pity we didn't have more of them with us, basically, to be honest with you. So it took us approximately 7 days to get out of prison. I was lucky enough to be on one of the first group to be brought back. It was only for, I think, the pressure that came from home. I suppose the main element of us going there in the first place was to highlight the treatment of Palestinians in Gaza. And I definitely think this worked, but the fact that people at home were Belragan, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Thomas, my own dad was on the radio, for example. We had plenty of coverage nationally, but it was only this pressure, I think, that was actually that led to our release, because the Israelis would constantly say to us, oh, well, we'll keep you here forever. We knew that wasn't true, but the attitude of the Irish consulate had changed, because the Israelis were being very difficult with them. They would search us after the consulate had come in, as if the consulate was smuggling in dynamite so we could escape or whatever, you know. It was just quite farcical at that stage. Eventually we were taken to a detention centre at Ben Gurion Airport. A different experience from Ben Gurion Airport. It was actually far worse than prison. We were told we'd spend 2 hours there, and they kept us there for about 36 hours. We were put in a cell. Myself and Trevor Hogan were in the cell together, the rugby player, Leinster rugby player. You know, we'd no access to a toilet. There was a sink there. In order to get any attention, we had to run the table, you know, up against the cell door, and then they'd come down. Eventually, they might let you go to the toilet and everything. So it was quite difficult there. But I mean, we had met people in the prison that had been moved around prison for about 2 years. We never met any Palestinians there. But from research, when I came back home, I found that there was 40% security prisoners in Givon prison in Ramla, which is, you know, Palestinians, and there was 3% children actually in the prison as well. But you know, eventually we got on the plane and we were able to get the hell out of there. But our treatment in Israel is just only indicative, I think, of how the Israelis treat not only activists going on these kind of missions and stuff like that, but also even the Israeli left, I would say, that even puts any semblance of resistance up to their own government whatsoever. I suppose it's hard to discuss something like this without putting it in context, so we're going to try somewhat whatsoever. The olive tree is a very good symbol, I think, of what happened in Palestine. In 1948, the land of Palestine was ethnically cleansed, and there's been virtually written out history books. Up to 800,000 Palestinians were forced to flee from their homes, and there was numerous massacres on behalf of the Israeli government. You know, villages like Deir Yassin, you know, they did atrocious things. They would play, they would play tapes of massacres in other villages to try force people out, stuff like this. And this happened when the whole rest of the world is sitting back and allowing this to happen. The British facilitated the Israeli state being formed. In 1948, the UN passed a resolution to partition the land of Palestine too, giving Israel one half and Palestine obviously the other. But at the time, this was 56% of land for the establishment of Israel, with only 6% of the Jewish population actually in the land itself. So I mean, it was incredibly biased, and I suppose they supported this ethnic cleansing by establishing the country in the first place. It's long been held Israel as, you know, a land without a people for a people without a land, and this was the common message that was put out for many years. But I think the international community is waking up to what's happening in Israel, and the solutions for the crisis in the country has also changed quite dramatically over the last kind of 10-20 years. You know, the Israeli force might, I don't want to focus on it too much, and I don't want to focus on it at all really. You know, the only reason Israel is allowed and permitted, or ever got the chance to establish itself on the basis that it has, was because of the support of the Americans. You know, after the '67 war, military funding for increased fourfold from America, so it was always a very strategic watchdog based. And I actually have a quote here from it. It says, Israel has become the watchdog. If for any reasons the Western powers should sometimes wish to close their eyes, Israel will be relied upon to punish one or several neighbouring states. And this is exactly what Israel has become. It is a watchdog in the Middle East, surrounded by states that were propped up by the Americans for many years. And you know, it's only been recently, until the struggles in Egypt and the surrounding countries, that real hope for Palestine has actually come to the fore. And there's obviously been numerous peace processes. The Oslo peace process being the main one, but it's always been Palestinian resistance. The intifadas that have pushed Israel into a position to negotiate with Palestine whatsoever in the first place. But the results and the fruits of these peace process has always been that Israel will further increase its stranglehold on the people of Palestine, increase the settlements in the West Bank double-fold after the last peace process. Obviously, there's been huge changes in Palestine the last kind of 15 years. The emergence of Hamas has come from Obviously, the reluctance of the PLO, well, I should say the reluctance, but the PLO basically was formed outside of Palestine, in the Arab states out of Palestine. So it was always limited in what it could achieve for the Palestinian people, because it was bedded to the Arab governments that surrounded it. Hamas differs quite a lot because it actually is formed in Palestine itself. But I don't want to get too bogged down on political parties in Palestine. We went to Gaza for a very simple reason to highlight the desperate inequality there. But I mean, I'm a socialist. I don't think it's just about highlighting these things. I believe the only solution we can have in Palestine and Israel is for one person, one vote in the country. I don't think there can ever be a solution, a proper solution to the crisis, until some of the events, such as 1948, can be truly addressed. Israel constantly, will not even entertain peace talks with Hamas, or any level of talks, because it says that Hamas wants to wipe Israel off the earth. I mean, the truth is Hamas have offered what they call a hudna to Israel, which is a long-term truce similar to what Sinn Féin would have offered the British government, although it doesn't formally recognise Israel or the presence of Israel in Palestinian lands. It can go into negotiations, blah blah blah, without formally doing this. So, I mean, the solution is always going to have to be an international one in the first place. Jerusalem is going to have to be shared on an equal basis, and the dismantling of the apartheid wall needs to come down. Needs to come down straight away. But what we can do here in Ireland, we can get involved in the boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign. And the truth about Israel is that it's been held up as being this Western beacon of hope in the Middle East. I mean, this obviously is not the truth, and it's up to us that know better, that are educated on the issue, to highlight Israel for what it is. It was this analysis that gave the campaign during apartheid South Africa was able to put huge amounts of pressure on the South African government by boycotting South African produce and by highlighting the desperate inequalities in the apartheid regime there. Israel is no different than South Africa. In fact, the treatment of the ANC in South Africa, as heinous as it was, doesn't compare to the treatment the Palestinians face. South Africans were never bombed with phosphorus shells, for example. So I'll leave it there anyway. I know it's a bit all over the place. It was quite difficult to do to squeeze it all into one thing. So thanks.
All right, thanks. I think the level of information that's coming out of the two lads is just incredible for me as an activist. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. But just before I do, to announce that there is a CD out, Lost Youth Songs of Solidarity, the benefit CD for a young Palestinian theatre performer who was imprisoned since 2005, who's set to be released in 2012 as far as I know. But just to give some examples, there's tracks from Gráinne Holland, Barry Kerr, Damien Dempsey, Low Key, and a number of other people. It is for a good cause, and we have someone down the back.
From Malala refugee camp, which the first speaker had photos of. He was 15 in 2005 when he was coming across to Ireland, England and Scotland to perform with the theatre group in Malala refugee camp. And he was stuck at the Allenby Bridge, and he was taken and interrogated for 2 months by the military, without legal representation, the usual. And then he was imprisoned, and he's still in jail. He's hoping to be released. We've been told it will be 2012. And he was very interested in doing journalism. So obviously his education and everything has been halted. A child in prison, there will be a huge amount of issues that Mohammed will have to deal with. He's one of hundreds, but there's a huge link between the kids and Ireland. They had a really special time here. So everybody's very excited with Malala, and it's €10. It's a brilliant CD, brilliant Christmas present.
I personally saw was definitely Hebron, and I was really struck by one of your slides of a checkpoint, a little cabin there across the street, because that's just below Cordova School. The kids going to school have to go through that checkpoint, and very often they are being harassed by settlers. So the EAs stand by the checkpoint, and while the EAs are there, the international presence is there, basically there's no trouble. But if the EAs are not there, the kids do get quite a lot of hassle indeed. Now, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but what I would like to just say that it is an extremely good idea to visit Israel, Palestine. You can go, as has been suggested, with the ISBC, PCA, with Elaine Daly, and I've been on 2 of those trips, and then usually just about a week. But if you become an EA, if you go out onto that program, there's the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program for Israel and Palestine. That's a program of the World Council of Churches. If you go out on that program, you go out for 3 months, and you're placed in one of, now there are 7 stations. A new one has been opened up in the South Hebron Hills because of the harassment from settlers there. Now, I think I've said more than enough. That would be my appeal. And if anybody wants literature about the EAPPI, I can give them some. I mean, I don't have it here now, but I'm quite happy to give my email and you can email whatever.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment or ask a question? Don't be shy.
Palestine last year, and I think it's not until you actually go there do you realise the extent of like the restrictions that Palestinians face there. You know, if you look at slides and everything, but not until you go there do you actually see or realise it. I know you did say something about the wall, and did you say that there was something about its suicide bombings decreased since the wall went up? I don't know if that's true. You know, I know when they started building the wall, there was peace talks, and it was probably because of the peace talks that the suicide bombings decreased. Like when I was there, I met many Palestinians as well that were going to work illegally into Israel, crossing the wall, because there were many gaps in the wall as well. So I mean, if that was true, and people did want to do that, it is possible. And there's another thing as well, like with the EAPPI, they're looking for a communications officer at the moment.
That's right.
Yeah. So just to let people know that. Okay, thanks.
Like, I know that news channels generally have an agenda and everything, but there's a really good channel, you probably know about it, it's called Press TV. And it's on, just to let you guys know, it's an Iranian news channel, and Sky are going to block it soon. And it's 515 is the channel, and they have lots of like information about Palestine, and they're very, I would say they're objective, but that's just my view. And they give like loads of information, not just about Palestine, they're very, very global news network, and it's worth checking them out. Like, they have a website as well, and you know, it's better than watching Sky News and everything. So, yeah.
So you did mention at the end there about the boycott. Like today I was in my local fruit and veg shop, and there were 7 Palestinian strawberries. And I'm just wondering if they're from Gaza, I'm not sure or not. So it'd be great if you increase the demand for Palestinian strawberries here. Create a market for them. Put that out there.
I know a lot of people have opinions on it, so please do share.
Yeah, one of the points Jim made there about the settlements that are on Palestinian land, and their tendency to be at a high level. All of those settlements, they're all interlinked, you know. There's a lot of infrastructure there as well. There's communications, electricity, water provision, and so on and so forth, transportation and so on. The only system on the settlements that are not interlinked is the sanitation system, and the reason is that it is freely dumped. The sanitation flush from the toilet is freely dumped down here onto the Palestinian land outside of the settlement. And it's just left then to go set the scenic in the area, and this is why that is an area that people are supposed to live in. You know, so it's just another one of the points on the relationships that occur. Also in Jerusalem, with one of the holes in the wall, and the holes in the wall is in an area in Jerusalem where Palestinians live, where it's policed by the Israeli police and the IDF. The whole, it can be accommodative for people to pass through to do work and so on and so forth, but at least once a week, each week, for the last 5 years, there's been heroin coming in by the IDF into Palestine, Jerusalem. Okay? In the same period of time, this has been video recorded on camera, and in the same period of time, the population of heroin addicts in Palestinian Jerusalem has increased from 600 to 6,400. Okay? So we're talking about a fairly significant, and again, it's, people could look back at history and say, oh, was that tea war that happened in China with the British, or was it an opium war? Okay? Such drugs as heroin destroy communities. Everybody knows that. People here who have existed in Dublin and seen it, they know that it happened there. Wherever it goes, it destroys. And the objective of that particular hole in the wall is to destroy, and the means to do so is heroin. Okay, so that, those are just one or two of the points or the technicalities maybe I'd bring to that meeting. Thanks.
Just to say that there is a contact sheet going around for the Social Workers Party, and if you're interested, do leave a name.
Just a few comments there, and I think presumed referred to the wall, or I don't know, as Jim is the apartheid wall. And I think that's a very appropriate term to use for it, particularly the parallels between what's happening in Palestine today and what did happen under the apartheid regime in South Africa. And I think it was Desmond Tutu who just made the comment that the Palestinians were treated, a lot worse than the black people were under the apartheid regime in South Africa. And that brings me on, I suppose, to the point I want to make, that, it was great that people like you and Jim, were able to go over there, and a number of people in the room, but obviously that's not available to everybody, those opportunities. But people can play a part here in the campaign against the Israeli state and for the dismantling of the Israeli state, and that's to support the campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions. And that ties in with the apartheid again, because older people here will remember the campaign, particularly against those stores at the time of apartheid in 1986, when some of the shop workers refused to handle the South African produce and were fired, and you had the strike that lasted 2 months, or 2 years, sorry. And a similar campaign is a worldwide campaign, but in Cork here, for example, there's a few activists every month, and the last Saturday of every month meet at Dawn Square, and we go around to the main supermarkets in the city centre where Israeli goods are stocked, for example, Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, Dunn Stores, etc. And people can, if they're available, the last Saturday of every month, come to Dawn Square and join us in that protest. It takes about an hour, but also to raise awareness, and everybody can play their part by going into a supermarket, and if you come across particularly vegetables, herbs, fruit, etc., to bring it to the attention of the manager and say that you object to this fruit being sold, fruit that's grown on stolen land from the Palestinians. So it's a way of people here that can't make it to Palestine, showing solidarity and playing a part in ultimately, the destruction of that apartheid regime in Israel. Thanks.
That's like 1 o'clock on the last Saturday. It's only 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely people should get involved in the boycott campaign in Israel. I think it's very important. But I think the other point I'd like to make really is just, I suppose, because it can seem a little bit depressing, is to say what is the ray of hope here of things actually changing, and to make life basically in something in Palestine is to provide some sort of democracy, some sort of freedom, association, the right not to have to be able to walk on your own street and all that kind of stuff. And where is the agents going to bring that about? I suppose, is really what would probably preoccupy a lot of our minds, because we want to see some kind of change here. And I think we have to draw attention to the fact that the events in the Middle East, the way things have developed this year. Time magazine gave the Person of the Year Person of the Year award to the protester. And if you look in particular what's happened in the Middle East, from Tunisia to Egypt, like all over the North African area, all the way over towards Syria, you've seen country after country after country, massive challenges to the regime, massive resistance. In Egypt, overthrow of the Mubarak regime, who has been an accomplice in I would say, making sure that Americans' aims in the Middle East, putting down the Palestinians. He's been a main accomplice. He's been removed. And suddenly the question of revolution, the question of democracy, and a massive pro-democracy movement all over the Arab world, from the beginnings of the Arab Spring to what's going on today, shows that there's huge hope for real change in that area. And I think if we look at where the change can come about, it's to the working class in that part of the region, the Arab working class, in challenging the dictatorships that are keeping them down, offer a ray of hope, I think, to the Palestinians as well, because it's really going to, if for example this situation develops, and if the pro-democracy regime finally gets rid of the generals in Egypt, then the question of freedom for Palestine comes into the question. Already since the overthrow of Mubarak, we've seen the closure of the Israeli embassy, for example. We've seen the Israeli ambassador was sent home by young, angry political working class people in Cairo. We can see that happening in terms of snowballing. We see huge potential. So I suppose what I'm really arguing is that what the Arab world needs, what the whole region needs, is revolution, because it's full of dictators. It's full of dictatorships that are putting down their people. If that happens, then the question of freedom for Palestine becomes right central. And the other contribution I think people can make in this is by taking on board that particular lesson, because if it's true in the Middle East, it's true in Ireland and in America as well. We've seen the occupying movement, and all that kind of stuff. So what I would encourage people to do, basically, what I'm really trying to say is that we should get politically active, because the world is a mess. Palestine is one dramatic example, but there's several others. And a major contribution we can make here is by bringing down the despotic regimes in Europe that are attacking working class people, bringing untold misery, and bring about some sort of democracy in our region. In doing so, we can add to that flame of resistance and give encouragement to those people in the Middle East who are fighting for democracy and fighting for freedom for Palestine as well. Thanks.
Thank you for having me back in again. I'd like to just say something about the question of hope. And what gave me the greatest hope when I was there in East Jerusalem and traveling around Israel, Palestine, was the fact that I met so many Israelis that are very, very unhappy with the situation of the occupation. There's an organization called Breaking the Silence, which is Israeli military people who are fed up with the occupation and are wanting to tell the truth about what is happening in the West Bank. Don't forget, few Israelis actually get into the West Bank, and I guess none at all get into Gaza. And I didn't get into Gaza. We were asked not to go in there, because if we were arrested or anything else, the whole program was being shut out of the West Bank, and we certainly didn't want that to happen. But there's hope, I think, because of many Israelis that are against the occupation from very different backgrounds. Two kibbutzim that we visited on the borders of Gaza, the people there were totally against what the Israeli government was doing, and they, of course, have a common way of living. In Jerusalem, an organization called Women in Black have been demonstrating at a major intersection in West Jerusalem, that sort of Jewish Jerusalem as opposed to East Jerusalem, Arab Jerusalem. And they've been demonstrating there for over 23 years now against the occupation with placards, and as EAs we stood with them and took the flak that they were getting from the passers-by. There's another organization called Maxim Watch, and these are women that were alongside us at the checkpoints, the Gilo checkpoint coming out of Bethlehem, Colandia going north to Ramallah. They, of course, well, they spoke Hebrew, and some of them could speak Arabic quite fluently, and some of them were mothers of military. And they were, again, against the occupation, and they were monitoring the, if you like, the misbehaviour that did occur from time to time at the checkpoints. So there are a lot of Israelis that are far from happy with the situation, and I think that is going to be a bigger and bigger problem for the Israeli government. More and more young people are refusing to do military service, and if they do that, then they're going to get jailed. It may only be for a few days, but they have then a criminal record, and that blots their copybook and their careers for the rest of their lives.
There's a bookstall down the back with a range of different books. There's Socialist Worker, our 2-weekly paper, if you're interested in finding out more about the organisation. So I'm just going to ask Jim to come back in for a few minutes, and then you.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot of things raised there, and I just like to address a few of them, not to give any different point of view, just there were things that I noticed were brought up that I had a little bit more to say on. With regards to the refuseniks in Israel itself, there is, we're aware that there's a lot more people saying now that they will not go and serve their conscription in the occupied territories, and it's great to see that. I think I read somewhere that actually everybody in Israel is eligible for conscription, with the exception of, there's a few exceptions. One of the main ones are some ultra-religious Jews are not eligible for conscription, or by all accounts to work either. But there was a figure given by somebody lately. They said actually 50% of the people that are conscripted don't actually serve for one reason or the other. They have some waivers of some way or other, and there's a lot of refuseniks among those. Having said that, there is also a marked rise in Jewish fundamentalism in reports lately with regard to the treatment of women, especially. There was a report lately about some protest against women dancers, that they wanted their feet covered and stuff like that. And we've also seen the reports on women being told to go to the back of the bus. And this is supposedly the only democracy in the Middle East. It doesn't sound very democratic to me, Just another question was asked about the settlers as to who exactly they are. And again, I'm not speaking with any great authority, only that, from speaking to people on the ground there, and their opinion. But I think it's an accepted fact that most of the settlers in Hebron are from the Bronx in New York. Very few of them were actually born in Israel or had any connection with it, only that they were Jews. And as we know, every Jew in the world is entitled to Israeli citizenship, and not alone do they come back to Israel, even if you accept Israel in the entity that it is, or that they say it is. These people actually went to the West Bank then, and we saw various signs up there saying that the land was stolen by Arabs from Jews, going back, and you can go back and with all this. But the fact of the matter is that even Israel has designated this as a Palestinian area, and all you have to do is look at if you get a chance to look at the map, and it's a map that I wanted to put up here, but the internet connection isn't very good. And it shows you, the area A, B, and C, where there's different forms of Israeli control. And the whole area of the West Bank is completely under Israeli control. There's de facto. There's no two ways about it. And James spoke about the fact that all the settlements are linked by various types of communications and roads, and that anything that's left of the West Bank is pretty much sliced up by the likes of those. Regards to the BDS campaign. I can only just, at my voice, that I think everybody should look at what they're buying, and if there's any connection at all with Israel, first of all, don't buy it yourself, and secondly, make sure that everybody else knows what the connection is as well. Except there's a beer called Taybeh beer, Taybeh. It's a wholly Palestinian-owned brewery. It's the only Palestinian brewery in the area. If you can get the beer, get it. They have different problems producing it at the moment because of the water. But I think it's if you're going to drink beer and support a business, you should probably support a wholly owned Palestinian business. one other thing, one of the people that we met there was a member of the Knesset called Haneen Zouabi, who's the first female Palestinian Arab or Israeli Arab, as they call it, in the Knesset. She was on the first Freedom Flotilla, and you're talking again about, I suppose democracy. For her protest, she was attacked in the Knesset later, both verbally and nearly physically, and there was a campaign to revoke her citizenship as an Israeli citizen, which again, you're talking about supposedly democratic. The Press TV, definitely, people need to watch the likes of Press TV and Al Jazeera. No matter what you think of them, I think it's important that to get a view from all sides. I myself think that Al Jazeera is about the most unbiased that you can get, but there's a certain amount of bias there as well, but it's as good as you can get. With the music CDs for sale at the back here, that young fellow was from a camp called Balata near Nablus, 1 square kilometre, established for 5,000 people, 25,000 people living there at the moment. One doctor sees 350 people a day. So you can, next time you're sitting in the surgery waiting for the 3 or 4 people in front of you that have taken seemingly forever, think about if there was 349 other people waiting ahead of you to see a doctor on a day, and that's the sort of connection that the people are living in. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mentioned Olive Street, I never actually explained what I meant. In the establishment of Israel, there was over 100,000 olive trees uprooted from the ground. The Israel, as we look at it on the map there, as the whole land has been completely changed and manifestly changed. Its environment, there's parks built over villages. They very much tried to change the landscape. They have western trees planted instead of olive trees. So that was a strategic effort from the very, very start. Palestinian strawberries, I don't think they're Palestinian. I think the majority, the likelihood is they'd be.
And it sounds like Palestinian.
Yeah, I'm told not to buy anything like that because it comes in from the settlements. It's actually called.
I looked it up. I'm looking for the company on the internet. But it actually says grown on Palestinian land for global markets.
Yeah.
On the box, I actually brought it with me. And I bought them, and I've been looking up on the internet for like 2 hours today. Can't find out about it. There's a phone number on it as well. I'm going to ring and actually find out for sure, because I want to find out for sure.
Just on that point, there's loads of products where they don't actually, they'll say something like, oh, Palestinian or whatever, and they won't be. I'm Muslim myself, and during Ramadan, we used to buy these dates. And for years we thought, they were okay, and then way later we learned that, they were from Israeli settlements. So there's loads of brands out there, there's so much food out there, you just have to be really, really careful. They say one thing, it's the exact opposite.
I realise that, that's why I'm looking it up to see, so I'll find out for sure when people know.
Yeah, the boycott campaign is hugely important, but it's not going to solve the Palestinian problem. What it will do is force our own governments into a position where they're to put sanctions against Israel, which ultimately what's needed. Internationally, our governments have failed miserably on the issue of Israel, and it's precisely that reason that the likes of ourselves in this room who believe in rights for Palestinians on an equal basis should go out and actually campaign and put pressure. Only a week after I got back from Israel, after the Israelis made shit of Gilmore, I should say as well, because when they treat us like this, they treat the Irish state like it as well, and that's something the Israelis understood. Gilmore refused to call for a release, even when it was illegal for Israel to be keeping us there. I mean, the leadership of Labour are not going to do anything of the issue of Palestinian. Of the issue of Palestine, and I should say he opened the Israeli Film Festival, with a speech talking about Israeli culture and talking about Michael D. Higgins and the importance of culture in general, which is actually a slate against our president Michael D. Higgins, because he was a long-time supporter of Palestinian rights, but they're trying to coerce what's seen as being progressive into Israeli propaganda. This is an event that was also sponsored by the Israeli embassy. Gilmore walked past me and he with 2 feet in my face, smiling, going into the thing. So, I mean, that's what we're up against with the Irish government. So it's very important that we as citizens, can educate and inform people around us and put more and more pressure on our government. You know, it wasn't until the Dunsore strike that it really took off with that popular sentiment in Ireland, the whole idea of boycott. On the issue of the settlers, a huge amount of settlers have come from the former Soviet Union. Approximately 1.5 million have come from the Soviet Union. There was a lot of the security would seem to be you know, Eastern European, kind of Polish and stuff like that as well. But just go back to the fundamental point, which is how, you know, under all this oppression and the military might that the Israelis have, how can we ever defeat the Israeli regime and bring about, you know, freedom and equality for everyone in the land. Egypt is the key, I think. For a long time people have said that the road to Jerusalem comes through Cairo. For a long time the left and the people across the world have been looking at Egypt as a kind of industrial base for in the Middle East. There's been some hope. That hope came recently in February when the first wave of the revolution happened. But the point is to link up, and I should say the reason they got out in the streets originally was actually in support of Palestinian Intifada back when the textile workers in Egypt actually originally went on strike. It was back in 2000 in support of Palestinians, but it was the Palestinians that drove the Egyptians out into the streets. And it's by linking up social justice with national liberation is the future and the hope for the people of Palestine. You know, the millions of Palestinians that are living in refugee camps in Syria and Jordan and Lebanon, they know this very much so too. But the problem is, for many time, Palestinian resistance has been rooted in these Arab states as well, and rooted with the leaders. This is something that's starting to change. It changed when a new generation of very politicized, exiled refugees, not coming from the Nakba, that aren't used to just being, you know, oppressed the whole time, come from a different environment, actually a different headspace, that are actually able to take on and confront the state of Israel. But you know, talking to an Egyptian revolutionary 3 weeks ago, he's over back in Egypt now, and you know, he tells us that what we do here at home against our own government, you know, the fight against austerity even resonates within the Middle East. And I think that's absolutely true. You know, if you want to help the people of Palestine, there's no point in just saying that you support Palestinians and, you know, you recognise Israel as being an illegal or immoral state. You actually have to go out and do something about it. So I'd encourage everyone here. It's great that there's already a boycott group that does stuff every second week. Please get involved in that. And obviously, if you want to see a socialist solution to the whole crisis, join the Socialist Workers' Party. Thanks.
Thank everyone again for coming out. I know it's very close to Christmas and